What's up guys, welcome back to my channel, and for today's video we'll be looking at the Grand Mafia, and I will be sharing 11 Governor's War strategies that you can take to improve your game. And of course, without further ado, let's just dive straight into it. And for the first battle strategy is called the cat and mouse, and why it's called the cat and mouse is because let's say you are just moving into a new zone, maybe the desert or zone 2 or zone 3 area, and you have to fight against a faction. However, you want to keep the faction busy and also like try to distract them and burn the towers. So what this cat and mouse does is that you have a lot of these like smaller raid members that will randomly set raid to many of the other faction towers, and hopefully they will forget some of the other faction towers that you are burning. So this cat and mouse is very advantageous against a faction where they don't really have a lot of people online, or they don't have a lot of people to defend their own faction towers against you, which is attacking many of the faction towers. And the objective of this is to make sure that the enemy's faction tower reaches a burning state of 100%. So when the tower burns at 100%, the enemy faction is unable to reconstruct their faction towers quickly or rebuild their faction towers quickly. So they'll be in a burning state for I think about 19 hours before they can properly rebuild or reconstruct their faction towers up. So this is the first way that you can pressure your enemies offensively. And the second strategy is bubbling your faction tower or faction stronghold at 95% burning state. So what I mean is, before your faction tower or stronghold reaches like 100% burning rate, you should stop your enemies from continuously burning the faction tower. Why I would say like 95% is a very good time to bubble is because sometimes you might lag or you need time to switch your Governor's War specialties to activate the protection program, and this 5% leeway helps to prevent any mishaps from happening and prevent your faction tower from getting burnt. So what this like bubbling program does is that it will protect, I think at max level it will protect your faction tower from being attacked for 15 minutes. Of course you cannot continuously put up the bubble. There's a time limit of I think 1 day, so every day you can only put the bubble up once for this faction tower. The third Governor's War strategy is to keep your enemy faction towers burning and do not destroy them. Leave their faction tower health at 15,000 or like 10,000 health and below, which takes about maybe like 5 minutes to destroy the tower. And why you want to do this is because sometimes you don't want to completely destroy the faction tower if you don't want to like waste faction resources to rebuild it, or secondly you don't want this like burning effect to restart, because once the faction tower is fully burned and becomes a neutral tower, enemies can recapture the faction tower if you are not prepared and rebuild their faction tower again, and you have to reburn the tower again. So leave the faction tower at a burning state so you can come back later on. You can save manpower by preventing enemies from attacking or recapturing these like faction tower, or also like saving your own faction resources. So that is the third strategy. Next up, the fourth strategy that you can use, and I know quite a lot of people have been using it so far, especially in the Season of Chaos, where single raiders are usually not strong enough to capture an arsenal or even defend an arsenal, because people are double raiding or triple raiding the arsenals or whichever neutral buildings that you hope to capture. So of course the fourth way is to synchronize double and triple raiding, and how you do that is by having someone to delay the raid. So someone can delay the raid by sending like one hell cow which marches very slowly from very far away. When your raid count down to 0, all you need to do is to kick out this last person that is delaying your raid, and your raid will be sent out to attack whichever buildings immediately. And this can be timed well with like private chats with several raid leaders to see who should attack first and who should attack second or third. Double and triple raiding can also be used defensively. For example, if you have failed to defend your neutral building, your allied factions can come and send their raids immediately before the enemy gets to reinforce their partially filled raid or their wounded raid. So this can be very helpful, which brings me up to the fifth tip for Governor's strategy, which is to constantly switch troops and reinforce your neutral building or arsenal. So what you can do is, like, when you know that a raid is coming, keep sending multiple walking troops to your neutral building. However, there's a flaw to this constantly switching troops and also like reinforcing the arsenal. So number one is that you send your full troops inside the arsenal to or neutral building to defend, and this will also mean that you cannot send any additional troops to reinforce. So your faction has to have quite a number of active members participating in this so that you are able to rely on their reinforcement. And also there's a lot of coordination that is needed to know what the raid leader needs for reinforcement, be it bruiser, hitman or bikers. So for the 6th Governor's War strategy or tip would be to keep your crew buffs in the prison, downstate prison. And why this is very helpful is that it can really help give like an additional like I think 10% crew attack boost or something like that for your raid leaders. And you should also time when you finish the prison, because each of these prison buffs there's a time limit where you have to receive this prison buff, if not it will just disappear. Next up we'll be touching on underbosses, or rather UB, and there are 2 strategies in this. So our 7th strategy is, if you do not need your underboss, you can always give away your UB to your raid leaders to kill. Yeah, and this can give them additional underboss attack, HP and defense buffs, which is very useful for raid leaders. And next is the 8th tip of the Governor's War strategy, and this is not widely used because it can be condoned in a way. And the 8th tip is called a UB trap. And when UB trap typically happens is that you want to raid a certain character, and what you do is just you attach your underboss with like one tier 1 biker to send to a resource tile. Usually it's a resource tile, so that they'll capture your UB. If only if you are not bubbled, but if you are bubbled, you are safe from this UB trap, which is why I always recommend players to bubble up if they are not strong, because there's always this UB trap where if you capture an underboss, you are free to be targeted from anyone in the Governor's War map, which can be very dangerous if someone holds a grudge against you and they can just like triple or quadruple raid you. Why I say that it is not very well received is because usually you send a army to Tau Hit, and Tau Hit by itself is already not a very good act. And let's move on to the 9th tip of the Governor's War. And for the 9th tip is stationing troops in turfs. And what I mean by stationing troops in turf is that whenever a raid leader is set against your turf, there's 2 different modes where you can support your faction members. The first way is through the normal reinforcement, which helps increase the turf's troops by usually it's about 1 million troops for level 25 faction club. And the second way is through stationing troops. So what stationing troops does is that you're able to send one line of army with enforcers in it. And what usually people does is that they'll just send in a line of tier 3 troops with the enforcers but not their underboss. And this is to mess up their raid formation. And what I mean is that when raids are set against the turf and hits the turf, the first thing that the raid will hit is the stationed troops. For example, if the raid is a full bruiser, raid leaders will usually add hitman and biker, some hitman and biker, so that they will have a stronger formation and small amount of hitman and bikers will absorb most of the damage. And what the station troops does is that because it contacts the raid first hand, if the station troops is strong enough, they are able to wipe out like 10 hitman or 10 bikers, or wipe out the hitman and bikers away from a bruiser raid formation. And when they hit the actual turf, there is no cannon fodder in front of the formation, which will lead to the raid losing much more troops than expected. So stationing troops is a very important and integral part of turf defense. However, the downside is, of course, if you do not have hospital or if you don't have enough resources, most of the time your station troops will get a complete annihilation and you have to heal all of your station troops in your hospital. Let's move on to our second last tip, the 10th tip, which is to build your faction strongholds right at the state checkpoints. And why you do that is usually because the state checkpoints is a very hot spot where factions will try to capture different zones apart from their own zone so that they're able to expand their territory. And checkpoints is the beginning of the area where enemies can come to infiltrate your territory. So by building faction strongholds, you're able to prevent enemies from capturing your area slowly, much slowly, because faction strongholds takes a longer time to reach the burning state, and they also have a higher amount of health. And lastly, something that I would recommend people to do if you have control is to have either your zone 3 or your zone 4 be just a quick rob zone for level 7 diamonds. And overall this can help players tremendously, because honestly, prior to having a quick rob zone, both zone 3 and zone 4, I have honestly never re-robbed a level 7 diamond tile. Though this would benefit some people who are always on the game searching for level 7 diamonds, but I bet not every one of you are very active in finding level 7 diamonds. I know I'm not. Therefore, I would recommend either the zone 3, zone 4 to be a quick rob zone for just level 7 diamonds. Okay, and before I end, I would just like to add 2 more bonus tips. And for the first tip, it is to have more players join a raid so that you can get this raid bonus buff. And you're only able to unlock this raid bonus buff after Governor's War 3, where you have a full Grand King set to unlock the first equipment investment of 5% raid join bonus. So I always recommend people to make more space in their raids if they have a lot of people online, so that you can get the maximum raid attack buff of 100%. And the second bonus tip is to always reinforce your raid leaders when they are fighting arsenals or different building battles with one bruiser rather than full bikers and full hitmen, because when you're experienced enough, you kind of know the marching speed of each particular unit. So even though your raid leader wants a full bikers raid, you should always add one bruiser so that you mess up your enemy thinking that it might be a bruiser raid or a mixed ratio raid instead of a single full hitman or full bikers raid. And yeah, this is it for my 11 tips or strategies for Governor's War. And if you do enjoy my video, do hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys again real soon.